Hey guys, Zom Fox here, and today we're going to be doing the Week 5 Power Rankings for the 2023 USFL season. This week wasn't as insane as last week, but was still a pretty insane week that had a lot of upsets, and we kind of know a lot more about the top, but the bottom is very, very wacky still. So, without further ado, let's get started with number 8, the Philadelphia Stars. Yep, the team that was the original number 1 spot has fallen all the way to 8, and I don't think this is a surprise to anyone. After their week 1 win, they've just been on a losing streak where it seems that nothing they do really matters as they just get beat every game. This game was the worst of them all. Look, they didn't just lose, they got beat by 25 points to the Houston Gamblers in a blowout. They had the ball for like 10 minutes less, and this is despite the Gamblers averaging 7.5 yards per play. So the fact the Gamblers held the ball as long as they did with that high of a yards per play is a really bad look for the Stars. They got outgained in offense by over 2 times the amount that the Stars had. It was terrible. And again, look, it's very obvious what the problem is. Their offensive line is horrific. That makes it to where Colburn doesn't have those, once in a while great games that he did last year. Instead, he just really can't do anything. So you end up having a still terrible rushing attack where you can see that the third to worst team is nearly 100 yards and the Showboats are near 70. The Stars are at 50. They get half a football field running the ball, and that's it. So if you can't run the ball, you can't let your quarterback do anything. They can't, win on play action, which is a huge deal. If you don't have a good offensive line, they can't really do, 4-step or 5-step dropbacks. So it ends up screwing over Cookus to where there's a few other teams that made quarterback changes or some that I think should. You can't really with Cookus. It's just that because of the fact that it's mainly the offensive line. Should they go to another quarterback? I don't really think so. I think the fact is you kind of stuck with what you have in sense that it's not really his fault because you just don't have an offensive line. So you either got to consistently just do a bunch of, 3-yard screen plays every single down, which becomes very predictable, or you just have to hope that you get an offensive line that's fixed in the future because right now it's terrible. I mean, this is apparent in the fact that their point differential is the worst in the league by over 10 points, and their offense in terms of points scored, aside from Pittsburgh, they're the worst in the league. And we know how bad Pittsburgh's offense is. So overall, the Stars are the worst team in the league. I don't think this should shock anyone. They are number 8, definitely by themselves. As for number 7 is going to be the Memphis Showboats. The Showboats move up 1 spot. I know some people might expect them to move up more spots, but I have my reasons for why I'm keeping them at 7. They move up 1 spot for beating the Panthers by 19 points. The reason I don't move up too much is because of the fact that this win definitely felt a bit fluky. Not in the sense that the win itself was fluky, but the game as a whole was. They had 4 turnovers end up helping them. A late surge by the Panthers was stifled due to not 1 but 2 separate fumbles near the end of the game. One of them resulting in a touchdown for the Showboats and the other giving them the ball back right at the kickoff. And there are 2 interceptions that happened early on. Essentially, if those turnovers don't happen, the Panthers definitely could win this game. Cole Kelly had a okay game. Again, not great. He did decent overall, 150 yards, but he didn't have 60 completion percentage. He didn't throw a touchdown. He was just kind of there. And the big issue for this team is their defense, even though they only gave up 10 points this week, is still tied for the worst in the league in points allowed. And their rushing attack, as I mentioned with the Stars, is pretty bad. Basically, 7 and 8, them and the Stars are just so much farther behind than everyone else that it's really noticeable. And the fact they've been getting injured at running back isn't helping them either. Really, it's not a surprise this team is where they are. I mean, there's not really much to say aside from that. They're just not that good, so I think that's very obvious they should be at 7. There's not a lot to talk about them, so that's basically it for the Showboats. Now, coming in at number 6 is the Michigan Panthers. I kept the Panthers here because I think the big reason for this loss was the turnovers. Because I think the fact is that they're not really that bad at any sort of stat. They're at least like in the middle of the road in basically everything. It's just that their quarterbacks didn't have a great day today, or a couple days ago. Carson Strong and Josh Love both played, and they both threw an interception. Love did throw a touchdown, but they, both had solid completion percentages. But it was the turnover and their yards per attempt that were bad. Love having only 3.9 and Strong having 6.3 were not good. I'm be honest, they need to have a full week where Strong is entrenched as the starting quarterback. This weird idea of starting Love, then going to Strong mid-game just for him to then get pulled a couple of drives later makes no sense. You either stick with the quarterback change or you don't, or you do what the Generals did last year and truly have a 2 QB system. Not a you play a quarter and a half, then this other guy plays a quarter, and then the other guy plays a quarter and a half. You gotta commit to something. You can't just, go willy-nilly like they're doing. Because their running backs are still pretty solid. both Stevie Scott and Reggie Corbin seem to be able to give you a good game. And in this game, they both were pretty decent, but Scott was better. He averaged more yards per carry. He had a longer long, but they both were overall pretty solid. Both had over 50 yards and over 3.5 yards per carry. That's solid. But their quarterback play wasn't good enough, and the fact is that those turnovers were early in the game and they really hurt them. But I think that overall, if they were to play again, I think the Panthers would beat the Showboats. So I'm going to have the Panthers at number 6. They fall down a decent amount, but I don't think they're as bad as the Showboats. I think that was definitely one of those fluky-ish games. That's where I'm going to stick them at 6. Coming in at number 5 is going to be the Pittsburgh Maulers. I have the Maulers moving up a couple spots despite the fact they lost, due to the fact that, for one, I think the Panthers looked really bad in their loss, despite the fact that it was a bit sketchy, and I think the Showboats didn't look good in their win. But the Maulers, they looked really good in their loss to the Stallions. They were able to force Magoo to have his worst game as a passer so far this year, which I'll talk about when I get to the Stallions. And the fact is, they had a quarterback play good. T. Will actually had a solid game, 21 of 33 for 63 completion percentage, over 200 yards. You would have liked to see the yards per attempt be higher than 6.6, but no picks is fine when you do have a touchdown because you ran for a touchdown. 63 yards rushing total, really solid job. The fact is, though, is that this team has dead last in for third down percentage. You need to be at 1 in 3 at least. At least 1 in every 3 third downs. They're not even at 1 in every 4. That's terrible. So basically, as soon as you get them into a third down situation, they're basically screwed. Then their yards per game is very bad. 208. I mean, come on. There are teams that are, basically like every other team is averaging there are many teams averaging 200 yards per game passing alone. This team can't even average 210 total. But the turnover differential is number 1 in the league now. That's good. If you are able to get turnovers and you're able to not turn the ball over, you get extra downs, you get extra attempts, you get extra drives, you get extra chances at getting points. So if you win the turnover battle, like I always say, is the most important one of these stats. They're number 1 in the league. That's why I put them above the Panthers. The Panthers held that title for a while, but their terrible performance and turnovers this week knocked them down. Because of that, I have the Maulers at number 1, because they're not even tied. They are the only team with a 3+ in the turnover battle. That's despite the fact that their offense is still quite terrible. 38 points scored is the worst in the league by a mile. And their point differential, while it's not terrible, is mainly due to the fact their defense has overall done a pretty decent job. But the fact is they need that point score to go up a lot. You can't be nearly 30 points behind the second to worst team. Or the fact that the top teams are over 3 times as many points scored than you is horrific. That's a bad look for them. But hey, the Maulers, I think they'd earn their spot to go up a couple to 5. But number 4 is the Houston Gamblers. Houston Gamblers get number 4. The main reason is the only player you see on here, M. Thompson, good old Mark Thompson. He has played 2 games. He did not play the first 2 weeks. In fact, he got ejected in the second game, despite the fact that he wasn't even playing. He is already 4th in rushing yards. He's played 2 games. He has 5 rushing touchdowns in 2 games. Darius Victor had 9 last year to lead the league, and he played the whole season. Thompson has 5 already. Unbelievable. Him and Wes Hills are going to have a great battle for Offensive Player of the Year. The team itself, though, once you get past the awful defense of 109 points allowed, which is the worst in the league, and considering the fact they had a decent performance against the Stars, who have no O-line, isn't really saying a lot, you look at their offensive stats. Look at them against the Stars. Dominated in time of possession, dominated in total yards, dominated in yards per play, despite the fact they didn't even have that many more plays than the Stars, and they had the same amount of drives. Unbelievable performance by their offense. And then categories, they're the best in rushing, or they're the best in third down percentage. 55% if you round up is what they're averaging. You get to a third down, you're supposed to hope to get it. The Gamblers are basically expecting to get it. That's insane. And their rushing yards per game are 2nd in the league, despite the fact that, as I said, Mark has only played 2 games. So even before he got here, they're already good, but now they're just even better running the ball. This team deserves their top 4 spot. They deserve to be number 4. Hopefully they're able to, get some W's. I think it'd be really cool to see them make the playoffs. But them against the Stallions and Breakers, those are going to be really important games coming up. But we'll see. Now coming in at number 3 is the Stallions. A lot of people are probably going to be upset at this. But despite the fact they have, tied for the total points scored and the best point differential in the league by a decent margin, I'm keeping them at number 3. The reason, against the Maulers. This was not against the Breakers or Generals, or even the Gamblers for that matter, where you look at a team and say they're really good. You beat a team that before this week was number 7 in the league, and they moved up because of how well they played against you, not because they played bad. They literally moved up because they did a really good job against the Stallions. As I said, Magoo had his worst game this year. Under 60 completion percentage, under 200 yards passing, under 6 yards per attempt, a 1-2 touchdown interception. Well, 2-2 if you count the rushing touchdown. He had a terrible 56 quarterback rating. Running the ball, he did solid. And in fact, this is the first week the Stallions actually ran the ball pretty well. They had 3 separate guys rush for over 35 or more yards with at least a 3.5 yards per carry. But man, they're really good at third down percentage at 51.3. And then every other stat, I don't know. It's just, I don't think the Stallions deserve to move up. I don't think they did a good enough against a team that they should have dominated. The fact they barely got away with this one is a bad look for them, I think. So I'm going to keep them at 3 just because I think the fact they should have demolished the Maulers, or at least beat them by at least 10. This should not have been a game that was mainly decided by like 90-yard kickoff return. That's not the way this type of game should be decided. Stallions stay at number 3. Coming in at number 2 is going to be the New Jersey Generals. The Generals stay at 2. I felt I had the right pick keeping above the Stallions last week, and I felt like I was definitely right about this. The Generals played the best team in the league in the New Orleans Breakers, and they gave a really, really good fight against them. A 3-point loss is all it was. And the fact is the Generals played a really solid game. Look, DeAndre Johnson had a overall solid game, 101 quarterback rating. The only issue, or pass rating, the only issue is that he didn't throw the ball a lot, so it's a bit of a, kind of skewed number. He only threw the ball 14 times and only had 50 completion percentage. But his 113 yards and 8.1 average per attempt is honestly the 8.1 is better than a lot of quarterbacks this week. In running the ball, the team did what they always do. They had 3 separate guys rush for at least 7 yards per carry, though, and without any, insane outlier. Yeah, the 30 and 23 are a bit outliers, but they're not insane. Trey Williams and Darius Victor had great games running the ball. DeAndre Johnson had an okay game running the football compared to them. But they're running the ball still very solidly. Their defense is the best in the league. They've only allowed 63 points. And rushing yards per game, they're number 1 by a mile at nearly 170. This game was very close. They could have won it. But the fact is that this is one of those losses where you look at it and say, this was a championship preview type of matchup. At the moment, these are the 2 best teams in the league. I know some people might say the Stallions. No. At the moment, these are the 2 best teams in the league, the Breakers and Generals. The Stallions are too injured, and the fact is that I think it's very obvious that if they played the Generals again, they would have lost. The Generals seem to be back on track. Yes, they lost this game, but they're still doing what they did last year, and that's running the ball very well. They just don't have the passing as great as last year. But if they can just get that passing up a little bit, like let's say DeAndre completes like 10 of his 14 attempts, the Generals probably win this game. So it's a very, very important thing to note that the Generals are back. They are a legit threat, and they are the best team in the North, which, they were last year, and it didn't matter in the playoffs, but at the moment, they are the best team in the North, and they're definitely going to be the team to beat there. But the Breakers, they're number 1 in the league. Is it really a surprise? I mean, really? Again, just look at this. They've still got the best rusher, who didn't even play in week 1, the best passer, the best receiver, who's a tight end, and the best kicker. They're the best in yards per game. Wes Hills had another great game, 88 yards rushing on 3.4 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns. McLeod Bethel Thompson had a 70 completion percentage, 279 yards passing, 7.5 yards per attempt. If he didn't have that 1 interception, he would have had a great game, and this game would have been a bit more in favor of the Breakers. They're the best team in the league. Are they as dominant as the Stallions were last week at this point? No. But are they better than they were offensively? Yes. The Breakers' offense, without any turnovers, is just unbelievable. Because, really, they probably do have the best at all 4 positions on there. Because Sage Surratt, I said last year in a video that is aged like fine wine, that he was the most interesting player from the supplemental draft. The Stallions did not use him right. They did not use him enough. And it's being shown this year. He is doing even better than Sal Cannella was doing last year, and he was viewed by everybody as the best tight end last year. That goes a lot to show how good this system is, how great DeFilippo has been doing as a coach, and how great this overall quartet of players are. Breakers are the best team in the league. So, overall, that'll do it for my power rankings for this week. As you saw, a lot of changes at the bottom, but the top is very, very firmly entrenched there. We'll see next week how many things end up changing. I don't know how much is going to change, but it's something going to be intriguing to see. I really do wonder how far the Breakers go as being undefeated. Just like we saw last year in the USFL, we see every year in the NFL, we see in other spring football leagues. It seems that every time a team will fall, I really do wonder if the Breakers, how long they're able to keep this undefeated streak going. I thought the Generals would win this week, and it was close, but they didn't get the job done, but we'll see. If you enjoy this content, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. We do at least 3 videos a week during the season. And as always, have a great night.